Sometimes people don't just disappear, they are found. But when they are, the answers only lead to more questions. Bodies appearing miles from where they were last seen, unreachable locations, strange injuries with no logical cause. What really happened to them? And more importantly, are we meant to know? In March 2014, Jim McGrogan, a 39-year-old physician, went on a hiking trip with 3 of his friends in the White River National Forest near Vail, Colorado. The plan was simple: hike the Spraddle Creek Trail to the Eisenman Hut, a well-known scenic spot. And it wasn't supposed to be anything extreme, but the snow made things tougher than expected. About 2 hours in, the group took a break, exhausted from trudging through the deep snow. But Jim? He was in incredible shape. He ran marathons, cycled long distances. He told his friends he'd go on ahead and meet them at the hut. And that was the last time anyone saw him alive. When the rest of the group reached the hut hours later, they expected Jim to be there waiting for them. But he wasn't. No sign of him anywhere. At first, they thought maybe he'd gotten turned around or stopped along the way. But as the hours passed, concern turned to panic. By 5 p.m., they had called authorities. The Vail Department of Public Safety and the local sheriff's department immediately launched a search. Now, Jim was well prepared. He had everything he needed: extra food, water, a GPS, even a medical kit. He knew what he was doing. So, at first, search teams were optimistic. They covered an 18-square-mile area on foot and by helicopter, logging over 700 man-hours in just the first 24 hours. But nothing. Not a single clue. No tracks leading off the trail. No sign of struggle. Just nothing. After a week of searching, hope started to fade. By March 21st, they called off the official search. It was like Jim had vanished into thin air. Then, 2 weeks later, on April 3rd, a group of backcountry skiers stumbled upon his body in Booth Falls, an area over 4.5 miles away from where he was last seen. And here's where things get really weird. Booth Falls wasn't just a little off course, it was miles away through deep snow and harsh terrain, requiring an exhausting trek. The search teams had already scoured that area, on foot and from the air. And yet, now suddenly, Jim was there. But it gets stranger. Jim's body was found still wearing his hiking helmet, but he had taken off his coat, gloves, and most bizarrely, his boots. Everything else was near him, but his boots were gone, no trace of them anywhere. Why would he take them off in the freezing cold? And why would he leave them somewhere else entirely? Then there were his injuries. The coroner reported he had suffered severe head trauma, chest injuries, and a broken femur. But these weren't the kind of wounds you'd get from simply falling or succumbing to the elements. And given the area where he was found, there was no obvious explanation for how he could have sustained such devastating injuries. About an hour after Jim was last seen, his phone made a single outgoing call. It went unanswered. But where did he make that call from? If he was lost, why didn't he try to call again? He had an extra battery, and his phone was found undamaged, and yet he only attempted to reach out once. If he had been wandering lost in the deep snow, there should have been tracks. But there weren't. If he had fallen from a height, there should have been a logical place where that happened. But there wasn't. Some say he got lost, became disoriented, and met a tragic end due to the elements. But others? They believe something far stranger happened. Some even suggest he was dropped from the sky. I don't know what really happened to Jim McGrogan, but I do know this: his story doesn't make sense. And whatever happened out there in the Colorado wilderness, we may never truly understand. Zygmunt Adamski. On June 6, 1980, 56-year-old coal miner Zygmunt Adamski from Tingley, West Yorkshire, left his home in the afternoon to do some shopping for an upcoming family wedding. Unfortunately, he would never make it back home. 5 days later, his body was found lying on top of a large pile of coal in a yard in Todmorden, approximately 20 miles away from his home. The circumstances surrounding his disappearance and the location where his body was found have given rise to numerous theories and speculations over the years. His disappearance was so bizarre, in fact, that some people believe he encountered otherworldly forces. Zygmunt Adamski was last seen seemingly in good spirits and health, looking forward to his family's upcoming celebrations. When he failed to return home, his family immediately became concerned, given the uncharacteristic nature of his disappearance. On June 11th, police contacted Adamski's wife, Lottie, to inform her that he had died under mysterious circumstances. His body was discovered by a man named Trevor Parker at 3:45 p.m., lying face up on top of a 12-foot pile of coal in the yard of a coal mine situated in Todmorden. Parker was adamant that he never saw Adamski enter the yard and was sure that he had not been there just hours before. This discovery was not only shocking because of the strange location, but also because of the state in which Adamski was found. Despite being on top of a pile of coal, his clothes had no coal dust on them. His eyes were wide open, as if he had been terrified, and his beard showed only 1 day's growth, inconsistent with the time he had been missing. Strangely, his clothes seemed to be improperly fastened onto his body, as if somebody had tried to dress him post-mortem. Medical examinations revealed even more peculiar details. The post-mortem indicated that Adamski had died of a heart attack, which occurred approximately 1 to 2 days before his body was found. However, more peculiar was the discovery of burns on his neck and shoulders, which had been treated with a substance that could not be identified by forensic experts. The nature of these injuries and the unidentified ointment, described as being quite advanced and not typical of any known medical treatment at the time, deepened the mystery. Police were baffled by the logistical implications of Adamski's body appearing on top of a coal pile in a busy yard without being noticed. This suggested that his body might have been placed there shortly before its discovery, sparking many theories about how this could have happened. Some speculated that he was murdered and his remains were staged to appear mysterious, while others believed he may have climbed the coal pile on his own accord and suffered a heart attack. However, these explanations do not account for the peculiarities of the case, such as the mysterious ointment or the absence of coal dust on his body. These factors, among other oddities, led many to speculate that Adamski had an extraterrestrial encounter. While this may sound far-fetched to some, the story of one police officer from Todmorden adds credence to the theory. Alan Godfrey was a serving police constable with the West Yorkshire Police and was one of the officers investigating Adamski's case. In the early morning hours of November 28th, Godfrey was on patrol in Todmorden. While driving his patrol car, he noticed an object in front of him that was entirely unrecognizable. Godfrey described it as being diamond-shaped and hovering a few feet above the road, with an estimated size of 20 feet high and 14 feet across. Unable to believe his eyes, Godfrey sketched the object in his notebook. He attempted to call for assistance on his police radio and his personal radio, but both were dead, a common phenomenon in many UFO sighting reports known as electronic interference. At that point, he observed a flash of light, and the strange craft vanished. Although he believed he had only observed the object for a few moments, his watch showed that 25 minutes had passed. Upon returning to the police station, Godfrey reported his sighting to his superiors and was initially taken seriously until the local media picked up the story. Many were skeptical of his encounter, causing issues in his personal and professional life. While some still do not believe his story, his sighting has become famous due to its connection with the Adamski case. The mysterious death of Zygmunt Adamski remains one of the most baffling unsolved cases in England. Some speculate that there is a missing angle that could tie the story together, while others believe Adamski's death was sensationalized and blown out of proportion. In any case, the fact that one of the UK's most famous UFO sightings occurred just months after this strange passing is simply too coincidental for many to ignore. It was Christmas Eve, 1975, and Peter Gibbs, an ex-Royal Air Force pilot, seasoned aviator, and a man known for his confidence, made a decision that would baffle investigators for decades. That night, he took off from a small airfield on the Isle of Mull, Scotland, on what should have been a routine flight, but he never returned. And when his body was found months later, the mystery only deepened. Gibbs had arrived on the island a few days earlier with his girlfriend, Felicity Granger. They were staying at the Glen Forsa Hotel, which happened to have a small airstrip nearby. While there, Gibbs rented a Cessna F-150H from David Howitt, the hotel's manager, so he could fly between the nearby islands. But on the night of December 24th, he decided he wanted to do something unusual. Take off in the pitch black of night and land the Cessna without any runway lights. Just to prove he could. Everyone told him it was a bad idea. The weather was poor, it was raining, and the airstrip had no illumination. But Gibbs wasn't the type to back down. He insisted he could do it. He asked Granger to stand at the edge of the runway and shine 2 torches to help guide him in. And just like that, he climbed into the aircraft, taxied down the strip, and took off into the night. Granger watched as the Cessna disappeared behind a line of trees. She expected to see it circle back any moment. It never did. Minutes passed, then half an hour, then an hour. No sign of him. Panic set in. Given Gibbs' experience, his failure to return made no sense. A search party was launched almost immediately. Local authorities, volunteers, even aviation officials scoured the area and surrounding waters. But there was nothing. No wreckage, no distress signal. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Then, 4 months later, on April 21st, 1976, a shepherd named Donald McKinnon made a disturbing discovery. Gibbs's body was found lying partway up a hillside, just a mile from the airfield. But here's where things get really strange. First of all, that area had already been searched multiple times. Shepherds, farmers, even search teams had passed through there over the winter. If his body had been there the whole time, how had no one seen it? Then there was the question of how he even got there in the first place. If he had crashed into the sea and somehow swam to shore, the autopsy would have found traces of salt water on his body. But there was nothing. And if he had made it out of the aircraft alive, why hadn't he just walked back to the hotel instead of wandering uphill into the wilderness? His injuries only made things more confusing. He didn't have any major wounds, nothing that would suggest he'd survived a plane crash or fallen from a great height. The official cause of death was exposure. But why? How does a highly skilled pilot end up dying on a hillside just minutes from safety? And then, there's the biggest mystery of all. The aircraft itself was never found. No wreckage, no debris, nothing. It was as if it had simply disappeared. Years later, a local diver claimed to have seen a sunken Cessna just offshore, but no official searches ever confirmed it. To this day, no one knows where Gibbs's plane went. People have come up with all kinds of theories. Some say he was involved in something covert, maybe a secret mission or a smuggling operation gone wrong. Others think there was foul play. And then there are the more bizarre suggestions, that he was taken by something not of this world. Whatever happened that night on the Isle of Mull, one thing is for sure. Peter Gibbs took off into the darkness and stepped straight into legend. and we may never know the truth of what really happened to him.